Good evening, good evening, good evening. Peace and blessings and happy new year to everyone. I am back again for Dominion Mondays. This is a special edition of Dominion Mondays as I am coming with money wisdom for 2023. That's right. Money wisdom for 2023. This is a special edition of Dominion Mondays. Dominion Mondays. Blessings, Marika. Blessings, sis. So come right on in. Come right on in for this special edition of Dominion Mondays. All right. So hey Brian. So I want to talk tonight about money wisdom. And I want to open up by talking about wisdom. Okay? I want to talk about wisdom. Proverbs 4:7 says this: wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding. Proverbs 4:7 says this: wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding. So I want to talk to you as I open up on this special edition of Dominion Mondays. I want to talk to you about wisdom. And as good stewards and as men and women of God, we must walk in wisdom. It is absolutely necessary and it is absolutely essential. So, what is wisdom? Wisdom is the application of experience, knowledge, and good judgment. Wisdom is the application of experience, knowledge, and good judgment. Proverbs 8:12 tells us that wisdom dwells with prudence and finds out knowledge of witty inventions. So wisdom is the application of experience and of knowledge and of good judgment. So what does this have to do with money? It has everything to do with money. And in fact, it is more important and it is so very prudent for us to move in money wisdom in this year because the economic landscape has changed. It has shifted. So the economic landscape and the economic environment that our parents and our grandparents came up under, hey, Nate, it has shifted and it has changed. And we are no longer under that same economic environment. And I know many of you are probably thinking, or those that will watch the replay, you're probably thinking, well, things haven't changed all that drastically, but they are shifting. And I am saying that in the year of 2023, it is a pivotal year, and it is a year that we all must quickly recognize that the economic landscape is shifting and is changing, and we must do what we need to do in this year to prepare for that. Okay. So what makes me qualified to even talk about this on tonight? So I'll share with you a little bit of my testimony, just a little bit, not all of it. But in the year of 2006, my husband and I, we became proud homeowners for the very first time. And we were so proud. We bought our first townhome, and, we were so excited to go into that townhome. And if any of you remember that time period, we brought that townhome, or we purchased that townhome at a period in time, or at an economic time frame in which we purchased that home at the top of the market, at the top of the market. And so we were not victims to the predatory lending practices that were going on during that time, right? Because this was a time money was flowing very freely. Everybody was getting loans. People weren't even having to prove their income in order to get loans. None of that stuff, right? So we didn't fall into that category. We legitimately, were able to purchase this home based upon, our credit qualifications and our income and all of that good stuff. But needless to say, we purchased this home at the top of the market. And very quickly after, I'm going to say about a year or so, maybe a year and a half, we were underwater in that mortgage by hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we purchased that home in 2006, and I'm going to tell the price, okay, for $325,000. Okay, $325,000. We purchased this home, and in a year and a half time frame, that house was now worth $180,000, if that. So underwater, call it $145,000. And it was all because of what now has been deemed or named the Great Recession. Okay, because of the lending practices and all of the securitization of mortgages and all of that good stuff, when people began to not be able to afford these home mortgages, that they went out there and didn't have the income to afford it in the first place. Well, as they began to default, now these derivatives and these securities were no longer worth anything. And so the housing market took a tumble. We purchased our home. I can't remember the bank, but needless to say, Countrywide took over that mortgage after we purchased it, and Countrywide went out of business during that Great Recession. So during that time frame, people, my husband and I had to make a difficult decision to file bankruptcy in order to get out of a home in which we were underwater in regards to that mortgage. And when I was sitting in front of that bankruptcy judge and getting the debts cleared out and getting that home, cleared out under that bankruptcy, and I know I'm not using all of the legal terms right now, I made a personal vow to the Lord that I was going to educate myself and be a good steward, that I would not find myself in that economic situation again. And so fast forward now to 2 years after, and we're still dealing with the effects of the vid. Now we find ourselves in a completely different economic environment, and an environment that is similar to, but not necessarily exactly like, what I dealt with during the Great Recession when I purchased that home, and we were soon underwater in that mortgage. So I've learned a thing or two, and I've learned a thing or two the hard way. And so now I am a student of what is going on economically. I watch the markets. I watch what the government is doing. I watch what the Fed is doing, so that I know and my family knows what to do, what moves to make, so that we can protect the wealth that we've been able to accumulate up to this point. And so I want to share with you on tonight just some of the things. Can't give you everything, can't go into great detail about a lot of the stuff, but I at least want to give you some indicators, some, call it watch outs, some things to look for, so you know exactly the moves that you need to make in this year of 2023. Okay. So I'm going to break this down into two parts. Count them, two parts, okay? The first part of this segment, I'm going to break down the 6 watch outs I'm calling them the 6 watchouts for this economic season that we find ourselves in, or call it better, this economic climate, okay? Because these things will impact us not only today, but they will also impact us in the future. And then in the second part of tonight's segment, and I probably will go a little bit longer than what I typically go, I'm going to give to you 7 things. Okay, number is the 7. The number 7 is the number of completion. So I'm going to give you 7 things that you can do now. 7 things that you can do now that will help to guard and protect against the 6 elements that I will reveal in the first segment. Okay. So I want you to stay with me. If you can't stay with me, you can catch it on the replay. You can also find it on YouTube if you can't see it on Facebook on the replay. All right. So let's talk about these 6 economic factors, these 6 elements of the economic climate that we are currently in. And the first thing I'm going to lead in with is recession. Recession. Many economic experts will tell you that we are not in a recession, okay? And in fact, the particular organization that declares officially that we are in a recession, they can't do that until after we are already in the midst of it. So I say all of that to say to you all that we are in a recession, okay? We may be not in the full throes of the recession, but we are in it. We are in it. How do I know this? I know that Americans are not saving the way that they need to. I know that 40%, if not 50% of Americans right now cannot endure a $400 bill, a $400 emergency bill. That's a key indication. I know that auto loans are beginning to default. Credit card delinquencies are coming because credit card balances are increasing. So that means because of the recession and because of inflation, and I'll talk about that in a minute, people can't afford the basic necessities of life. When people can't afford the basic necessities of life, as businesses start to slow down, as we have seen with Amazon, as we have seen with Google, as we have seen with Twitter, these are these big tech companies. As things begin to slow down, that is a key indicator that we are in the midst of recession. Okay. So what is a recession? A recession is simply this. It is a decline in business activity. And a technical definition of it would be 2 consecutive quarters of such. Okay. Now, there are many people that thought we were in a recession in 2022. We did see, I believe it was 1 quarter of economic downturn, meaning that GDP growth or GDP actually contracted. But then the following quarter, we saw a bit of an uptick. Okay. And so they therefore could not technically declare it a recession or such. But I will tell you, based on other economic indicators, watching the economic activity or watching the purchasing activity and habits of people, we are in a changing landscape. And I'm saying we are in a recession even right now as we speak. Now, when you look at the history of recessions in the U.S., we've had about 47 of them since they started tracking them. We've had 12 of the 47 have occurred in the 20th century, and then we've had 3 recessions in the 21st century. Okay. The very last recession that we went through was, of course, in 2020 as a result of the vid. Before that was the Great Recession during the 2008-2009 period. And then before that was the 2001 period, which was the dot-com bust. Okay. Typically, recessions last a matter of several months. And then what you see as, I'm going to call it an impact or the aftermath or the collateral damage, if you will. And I don't want to say that very lightly, but the collateral damage of recessions is unemployment, high unemployment. And you typically don't see the higher unemployment rates until after the recession has occurred. Okay. And part of that is because of how they measure recessions. Okay. And measure unemployment rates. Now, stay with me. I know what I'm talking about. For some people, you may not understand it, but I want you to stay with me because this is very, very, very important stuff. So on top of us being in a recession or on the cusp of recession, no matter how you look at it, okay, we are also fighting we're fighting inflation. We are fighting inflation, okay? And when you open up the newspaper, when you look at your newscast or your news broadcast, they will be talking about the feds and what the Fed is doing in order to fight inflation, okay? And in fact, in the month of December, the Federal Reserve Board increased the federal funds rate, which then increases the rate at which banks and other lending institutions will loan people money and loan businesses money. Okay. So I want you to understand that we went from an environment for several years where the federal funds rate was zero. That means that money was easy to get, and money was free flowing. In those types of environments, when money is free flowing, when money is essentially free because the interest rate that is being charged is essentially zero, what happens? The system begins to inflate. Okay. So what else happened in the midst of the interest rates being zero? There was money pumped into the system as a result of the vid. Okay. Because of the 2020 recession, the money supply was increased. So you increase the money supply, you keep interest rates low. What happens? You create an inflationary environment. So now folks have all of this money. Now folks can go out and purchase whatever they want. Businesses now have the money by which they can invest. Many people went and invested in the stock market, which inflated stock market and stock prices. And so now in the midst of recession and with this higher inflation, now the Fed is saying, ho, 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 we got to slow things down. We have to slow down the spending. We have to slow down the increase in prices. We have to slow down the increase in the prices of homes. Okay. And so the recession and inflation will have an impact. It will have an impact on us. And so we've got to understand the impact that it will have. So inflation, you see it when you go and you buy things at the grocery store. Everyone has seen their grocery bill increase as a result of inflation. As a result of inflation, we saw gasoline prices increase dramatically. Went to $5, $6 a gallon for many folks. How did the gasoline prices go down? It was because President Biden decided to release oil reserves. The oil that we had in our reserves in case of war, he released that in order to bring the price of gasoline down. There can potentially be an impact of that later on down the road. Okay, but let me continue on with the impact and the effects of inflation. When we want to go to borrow money, whether it be for a car or whether it be for a house, the impact of inflation, the impact of the Feds increasing the interest rates it will cost you more in order to purchase that car. It will cost you more in order to purchase that home. or whatever it may be that you're having to borrow money in order to purchase something. Okay. For businesses, it is the same principle at work. So businesses that want to invest, but they need to borrow in order to invest, they're now having to pay a higher interest rate on that investment. Okay. So what happens now? Well, now in the month of January, the Fed is going to kind of see how things play out. The Fed comes back in February of 2023. It is highly likely that the Fed will increase the federal funds rate, or the Fed funds rate again. It may not be as steep as it has been in the past, but they are expected to keep increasing the interest rates even through at least the first half of 2023. So that means the cost of everything could either potentially continue to go up, but I can tell you that the cost of borrowing will still be high. Okay? It will still be high. That means that if you're looking to go buy a car right now, you could potentially be paying twice as much for that car. It's already been proven in many articles that the cost of home ownership is twice as much. So people are paying twice as much for their mortgages right now at 7 and 8% than what they were paying just a few years ago. Okay, so the effects and the impact of inflation and this recession will have lasting impacts at least over the next few years. It is estimated. Okay. Now, inflation, I will tell you this, inflation and higher interest rates, it does, and I'm using this word loosely, it rewards savers. So those people that save, you can get a better yield on savings accounts right now. You will see some banks are giving 3%, some are giving 4%. Some are given even a little bit more than that, provided you are willing to put your money in that institution for an extended period of time. Okay. So you can think of it this way: higher interest rates and periods of inflation, savers are rewarded. And then conversely, lower inflation and lower interest rates, those that need to borrow money, they are rewarded. Okay. So let's move on. So you got recession, you've got inflation, and now you have a currency. The US dollar, which is a fiat currency, is weakening. It is weakening. Okay. So during the 2020 recessionary period, and even, a couple years after that, the dollar began to strengthen. Okay. The dollar began to strengthen. There are some effects of why that happened. But when we say, simply put, when we say the dollar is either weakening or strengthening, it is in comparison to other foreign currencies. Quite often, the dollar is compared to the euro. Okay. The dollar is compared to the euro quite often. But in comparison, when you compare the dollar to other foreign currencies, the dollar was very strong. Now, there are some reasons why the dollar, there's benefits to having the dollar in addition to the dollar being a strong currency. And that is because it is the global reserve currency. So that means when other countries want to buy things such as oil, they have to take their currency, convert it into the US dollar, and then go purchase the oil. Okay. And, so I'll leave it like that. So needless to say, when the dollar is stronger, that means that the dollar goes further for us. So when we travel and the dollar is strong, that means we can go to foreign countries and our dollar carries us a little bit further. Conversely, when the dollar is weaker, then that means that our dollar doesn't go as far. Okay, it doesn't go as far. The same applies for you at home. So when you have a strong dollar, but when you don't have the effects of inflation, that means your dollar can go a little bit further. Okay. When the dollar is weak and you have inflation on top of that, that means that your dollar is not going as far as you'd like. Okay. So we talked about recession. That's the first impact. We talked about inflation. That's the second impact. We talked about the weakening dollar. That's the third impact. And now let's talk about debt. And I'm not talking about the debt that you may have personally, but I am talking about the debt that we have in this country. That is the fourth economic impact to what we will see in 2023. The US debt right now is a whopping $31 trillion. $31 trillion. I can't even imagine having debt that large, but that's the debt of this country right now as we speak. You can look up the US debt. There's an actual debt clock for the US. All you got to do is type it into your Google search and it'll pop right up. $31 trillion. We have added a whopping, I believe it's $20 trillion of debt since 2010. And don't quote me on that because I don't have those notes in front of me. But that's a lot of debt. So not only did we pump a lot of money into the system, but we're also borrowing money. The US is borrowing money at record rates. So the call it the perfect storm of recession and inflation and a weakening dollar and the debt crisis is going to have an impact. Okay, it's going to have an impact because now the US is having to pay back their debt at a higher interest rate. So just like if we bought a car at say 7, 8, 9% interest, right? Versus if we could have bought it 2 years ago at 3% interest, you're now paying that debt back at a higher interest rate. It is the same for the United States. They are having to pay back their debts at a higher interest rate, meaning it's taking more dollars in order to do so. Okay. So it's a very, very, very tenuous situation at best. Now add to that the fifth element, and that is the war that is taking place right now between Russia and Ukraine. That only adds to it as the US is continuing to borrow money in order to supply the Ukraine with weapons and defense mechanisms. So that $31 trillion of debt will continue to increase as we continue to supply gear and defense mechanisms for the war, and as we continue to take care of home by way of infrastructure. Again, all of these elements of the current economic climate will have an impact on how we live, how we spend, at least for the next few years. Now, the last thing I am bringing up is something that I want folks to keep their eye on, and it is not brought up very much, and that is the BRICS Alliance. The BRICS Alliance. BRICS. BRICS. That word BRICS stands for an alliance of 5 countries. That is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. All of these countries represent about 26 to 27% of global GDP. Global GDP, meaning that these countries in this alliance account for at least a quarter of the global GDP, if not more. These countries in this alliance account for 3 billion people in terms of population. These are producer countries. These are countries that actually manufacture and produce. And specifically as it pertains to China, as well as Russia, we know that to be true, and we know that to be the case. This is a watch out, and we've got to keep our eye on what happens with these particular countries and with this alliance. I can tell you China has already made moves to, I don't want to say undermine, but nevertheless, they've made moves with the Saudis to purchase oil, not in the global reserve currency of the US dollar, but in their own currency. When I tell you that the economic landscape is changing, it is changing right before our eyes. Our US media does not always put this information out in front of us, so we have to be watchful and we have to be mindful of everything that's going on. So let me quickly recap the 6 elements of what we are dealing with in this current economic climate. The first is recession. We are in a recession. I know a lot of experts won't say it, but that's where we are right now. Inflation. We see the Feds making moves to raise interest rates in order to combat inflation. The second is the weakening dollar. As the dollar weakens, that means that our dollars don't stretch as much, okay? The U.S. debt crisis is continuing to be a problem. And let me add here that there is a global debt crisis. There's a global debt crisis because the U.S. is not the only country that is facing debt. But I can tell you that the U.S. itself is facing record debt. We have not had debt levels at this, at the current level in the history of this country. Okay. We also are dealing with war and even threats of war. Continue to watch the climate and continue to watch the conflict between China and the U.S. over Taiwan. That can be a key problem for the U.S. if that conflict breaks out. And we're already supplying military gear and weaponry to the Ukraine. Now you add to that and another conflict with China, we could be in a very, very dangerous situation. And then lastly, we have to keep an eye on the BRICS alliance, okay? And thank you, Kingdom Chosen 12. They put some more commentary on what the BRICS Alliance is. So thank you for that. But that BRICS Alliance is something that we also want to keep our eye on because we need to be mindful and watchful of what that alliance will be doing, not only now, but also in the future. Okay, so those 6 elements is what we are facing right now. Now, I wanted to bring a few more, but I didn't want to inundate this particular broadcast with all of those elements. Okay, so I'm going to bring an announcement later on for those that want to have even more in-depth discussions like this. So what now? And what can you do now? Okay, what now? And what can you do now in order to prepare? Okay, so the first is this. I'm going to tell you to go back to your budgets. Many people talk about building wealth, But there's not enough conversation about the simple tool and the simple practice and discipline of budgeting. Okay. You need to go back to your budgets. If you don't have one, you can email me. I put my email in the description for this broadcast so I can help you set up a budget. But you've got to not only have a budget, but you need to be working that budget. You need to revisit that budget on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly basis, because you've got to get a hold of where your money is going. Okay. So why am I saying you need to have a budget? So not only do you need to know where your money is going, but you need to do some tightening. Just like countries are tightening, just like businesses are tightening, you've got to treat your family, you got to treat your budget just like a business. And you've got to run it like a business. So you need to tighten, okay? If you are in a situation where your expenses or your outflow is greater than your income, adjustments need to be made. You are not in a situation where you can borrow money at 0% interest. You are in a situation, we are in an economic climate that if you think you're going to borrow money, or if you think you're going to put stuff on a credit card interest rates now are running 15, 20, 25% interest. It will take you years to get out of that kind of debt. Revisit your budget. Go back to your budget. Tighten. Balance your budget so that your income or your inflow is greater than your outflow. Okay? Now, that leads to my second point. You get yourself to a point where your income is greater than your outflow. Now you are in a position where you can do the second thing, and that is save. Let me say this. I know many people talked about cash is trash. Cash is trash. I am listening to many economic experts, many financial experts that are saying that they are in a position of cash right now because they are setting themselves up to watch and see so that they will know the next moves to make. Okay? So there is nothing wrong with having a cash position. Now, I'm not saying have a cash position for an extended period of time, but there's nothing wrong with having a cash position until you know the next move that you need to make. Now, when you've got that cash, right? What do you do with that cash? I'm going to tell you you got a couple different options, but one that I'm really going to urge you to do. And that is, I want you to keep some of that cash you have saved up. I want you to keep it outside of the banking system. Why am I saying that? So I taught a class, maybe I say earlier in 2020, maybe around the summertime. And I began to urge people back then, keep some cash outside of the banking system. Keep cash outside of the banking system. That is in the case that there is what they call a bank run, meaning that they decide, hey, you're not going to be able to pull money out of your bank accounts. You will have money outside of the system and outside of the digital system, which is the credit cards or the debit cards, because they can also suspend spending on that as well. So you've got to have some cash outside of the system. It cannot all be in the system, okay? Stash it securely, okay? But you got to have something outside of the system, all right? You're going to need to have that cash also, so when you need to have quick resources on hand, you can go and do so, okay? That's the importance of having the savings. In the case of emergencies, In the case of a bank run, you've got access to the resources that you need. I'm also telling you and encouraging you to, if you want to do this, and if you have the additional income, pay down some debt. Pay down some debt. Now, I say this kind of lightly because I know not everybody is in a situation where they can do so. Okay. But the reason why I say that is because as the dollar is weakening, as inflation is increasing, as interest rates are increasing, your dollar is not going to stretch as much, meaning that if you have debt, it's more money that you're putting on that debt in order to get rid of it. Okay. But if you are in the position where you have some cash and that you can get rid of some debts quickly, I'm going to urge you to do so. But I'm urging you to do so not to the point where you get rid of all of your savings. So I say that very, very lightly. Okay. And the paying down debt now is actually number 3. So when I talk about the 7 things you can do now, I'm talking about budgeting, number 1, going back to your budget, revisiting your budget, getting yourself to a place where your income and your inflow is greater than your expenses and your outflow. That's number 1. That's going to free up money so that you can do number 2, which is save. That will also free up money so that you can do number 3, which is pay down debt. Number four, and this is for my friends that may have a little bit more cash on hand, and you may not want to, keep as much cash, and you still have an appetite for investing. There are still some areas in which you can't invest. Let me say this. Let's start with stocks, because we've seen the stock market really take a hit. Okay. So I'm going to talk about 2 things as it pertains to the stock market. Let's talk about retirement accounts. I will tell you that going back to last year of 2022, I think right around the summertime, I called up my retirement account holder, and I told them, I'm moving all of my retirement assets out of the stock market. I think the guy on the other end almost choked. But I told him I wanted to move that because I was not willing to expose my retirement assets to 40, 50% declines. I just was not willing to do that. I had endured that in the 2020 recession, and I wasn't going to expose my retirement funds to that again. If you feel that you are in that situation, if you are close to retirement, I'm saying you're like 5 years away, I would encourage you to call up your broker and to potentially get out of the stock market. They can put you in safer investments. Let me say, by the way, I am not a financial advisor, but I am a financial coach. I am a certified financial one. So what I am presenting here today is for educational purposes and to coach and encourage, okay? Not advising, all right? Now back to the regularly scheduled program. For those that are close to retirement, please look at how you need to rebalance and restructure your retirement assets. There is nothing that tells you you got to keep it in that stock market and get completely wiped out right now. When I made that call, the broker tried to tell me, oh, well, you're going to miss out on the upturn when the stocks do come back. Okay, well, I'll miss out on some, but I am not going to expose my assets to 50 and 60% declines. I just was not willing to do that. Now, the second piece is this. When we talk about retirement assets, there used to be the model, which they call the 60-40 model, 60% in stocks, 40% in bonds. I'm going to suffice to say that model is dying, and it's dying quickly. Why? Because both the stock market and the bond market are impacted. So you can't choose one or the other. They're both getting hammered right now, for lack of a better term. And that's why I can't stress enough that the economic landscape is changing. We are not in our parents' economic landscape, nor are we in our grandparents' economic landscape. All right. But if you are still interested in investing, here's where I'm going to tell you to go. Okay. So a good place to invest right now is in I bonds. Okay. The only problem with I bonds is you're limited to 10,000, but nevertheless, you can still get about 7% off of those I bonds if you invest in those. There are many that are investing in U.S. Treasuries. U.S. Treasuries are paying a halfway decent yield. Okay. And you can invest in U.S. Treasuries. You can still invest in some stocks, but you got to be careful. You may not necessarily be able to invest in index funds and certain ETFs that I know many people like to do, but there are still some individual stocks out there that may be of interest to you. Okay. Also, if you want to invest in the stock market, I would say go with U.S. commodities, or to go with commodities, not just U.S. commodities, but commodities, getting into the commodities market. These are things that people will always need, or businesses will always need. So that is a safer place, as well as consumer staples. Consumer staples. Those are safe places, or safer places, let me say that, where you can invest your funds. If you don't have money to put at risk right now, you are only going to do steps 1, 2, and 3. That is budget, that is save, and that is pay down debt. If you can risk some exposure because you've got 1, 2, and 3 on lock, then I'm saying you can go to step 4. For my really savvy people, the next thing that I'm going to encourage you to do is insure. And I'm not talking about with the traditional modes of insurance, but I'm going to talk about investing, or let me say it this way, insuring some of your wealth with gold and silver, i.e. precious metals. Now, this is something that many people are not talking about right now. And I've been talking about it for at least a year now. And I've also been investing in or purchasing gold and silver for at least a couple of years now. Okay. And you can also invest or purchase gold and silver and precious metals even through your retirement accounts. All right. So you can insure with gold and with silver. If you're really savvy, you can go to platinum and palladium and some other ones. All right. But gold and silver right now, because of what we saw in the crypto market, because of the scandal that we saw with FTX, gold and silver are some places where folks are turning to insure their wealth. So why am I saying insure with gold and silver? Because gold and silver aren't necessarily investments. Gold and silver and other precious metals are things that you use or things that you buy because they are a store of wealth. They store value, rather. They store value. And in storing that value, you protect your wealth. So you don't buy gold and you don't buy silver because they pay a dividend. They're not like a stock. It's not like a bond. It's not paying you a yield, but it is protecting and it is insuring some of your wealth. There are some people that say 5% or so in terms of your overall portfolio should you have in precious metals. So if, you know, for those that are interested in that, that's a good baseline for you in terms of what you want to invest in, or how much gold or silver you would look to purchase and have in your portfolio. Okay. So we talked about budgeting, we talked about saving, we talked about getting out of debt, we talked about investing, we talked about insuring. Now I'm going to say this to you guys and gals on here tonight, watching live and watching the replay. I'm going to urge you, because of the cost of borrowing money right now, if you don't need to buy it, don't. And I know this is not popular. I know I've got some friends that are in real estate and are real estate agents. I apologize to you all in advance. But if you don't need to buy it right now, don't. The cost, the mere cost of things right now is much too high for many people, that many people can't necessarily afford it. If you can afford it, I'm going to say pray and get some direction from the Lord before you go and do that. But by all means, follow the leading of the Holy Spirit. But for many people, purchase right now. Wait for things to cool down a bit. Wait until you see the direction of the way the feds will go and that kind of thing. All right. So why am I saying this? And in particular, I learned this hard lesson back when I bought that home, and my husband and I bought that home in 2006. We bought that home at the top of the market. That home quickly lost value, and we were quickly underwater in terms of the mortgage. Now, that's an extreme case. I'm not in any way trying to predict nor prophesy that that is what's going to happen with the housing market. But what I am saying is that the Fed has been clear. The Fed chairman, Mr. Jerome Powell, has been clear that home prices must come down. They must cool down the home prices. So that means those that are sitting in homes right now will lose some equity. Those that have purchased homes recently will lose some equity. And so it is very, very difficult to predict the direction that things will go. So I'm urging folks, if you cannot afford to do it, don't. If you can, pray, and by all means, follow the leading of the Holy Spirit. But many people are in a situation that they cannot do that. Okay? The last thing, and the seventh thing on my list, is educate. Educate yourself. Financial literacy has been underestimated, often overlooked in this country. But I cannot stress enough the importance of financial literacy. It is important that you understand what's going on, at least bare minimum. What's going on with the interest rates? What is the Fed doing? What is their next move? Okay. There are a couple things I did not call out in terms of economic factors, and I did that intentionally, but there's still a pending digital currency that we can anticipate and expect from the central banks. We don't know what it looks like. We don't know when that will happen. Some people I know are saying that that is potentially the mark of the beast. I'm not necessarily saying that. We don't know when that will be ushered in, but I'm telling you, it is going to change the game. And it's going to change it quickly. And there will not be warnings. There will not be warnings. It will be one way on a Friday, and on a Monday, boom, they will have ushered it in. Another thing I want you to look at when you're educating yourselves, look at what they've done in Canada. They have done certain things in Canada, and I can't call all of them out, but they have already started to usher in certain things. Look at what they have done in China. They have already started to do certain things in China with their citizens. When I tell you it's going to happen, it's going to happen quickly. And I'm trying to say this without calling out certain key words, but certain things that folks have predicted in terms of the great is coming. And we just have to move in wisdom. We have to move in wisdom. Yes, there will be a wealth transfer, but we must position ourselves to be on the side where we can receive the wealth. Now, that wealth that shall be received, it is not to be consumed upon our lust, but it is so that we can now put that money into the advancement of God's kingdom. And so I come before you on today, hoping that this message blessed you, hoping that this teaching blessed you in a way that you at least have a little bit more insight than what you had before on what lies ahead. And so in my close, my announcement for everybody, and I know I stepped away from DominionOverFinances for a little bit, but it is my assignment in this year, 2023, to pick it back up. So I'm going to keep Dominion Mondays intact, and I'm going to bring back DominionOverFinances. So I'm just asking you to pray for me and keep me in prayer as I move into this new dimension, if you will, of ministry, because it's going to be a measure that's going to stretch me, but it's an area and it is a teaching that is needed for such a time as this. And so I've not decided just yet when DominionOverFinances is coming back. That's why I'm saying just keep joining me on Dominion Mondays, and I'll keep posting the announcement of when I'm bringing it back. But I'm telling you on tonight, DominionOverFinances is coming back because we've got to prepare. We've got to be prepared, and we've got to move in wisdom. For some reason, Holy Spirit just had a hold on me in terms of walking in wisdom. I think walking in wisdom is just one of the things that, we've got to move in this year. So we're going to walk in wisdom. This is our year of dominion. This is our year of disruption. We're going to disrupt some systems this year. So I just ask you to come along with me in this journey. And I look forward to serving you, continuing to serve you in Dominion Mondays and continuing to serve you with DominionOverFinances. So with that, peace and blessings to you all. I declare and proclaim peace and prosperity, not just of your finances, but may you prosper and be in good health in this year, 2023. Thank you for joining me for this first broadcast of this new year, and I'll see you back here next Monday at 8 p.m. Thank you, good night, and God bless.